America's online Irish station, Radio Irish at radioirish.com. That's what you're watching and listening to. Sean McCarthy here, and we're delighted to have attended a special reception here at the Irish Consulate on the 17th floor of 345 Park Avenue here in New York City, at the invitation of Consul General of Ireland, Mr. Noel Kilkenny, and Mrs. Honora O'D Kilkenny, Deputy Consul General Peter Ryan, and all the team there at the Consulate on the occasion of the visit to New York to address the United Nations of Ireland's Deputy Prime Minister, the Tánaiste, and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade, Mr. Eamon Gilmore, TD. The Labour Party leader has held meetings with the United Nations Secretary-General Ban Ki-moon and other foreign leaders at the UN General Assembly, as well as with US diplomat Richard Haass, the chair of Northern Ireland's all-party talks on flags, parades and contentious issues. On his 5-day trip to the United States, Tánaiste Gilmore has discussed the war in Syria, US immigration reform with members of the Irish-American community here in the United States, and investment opportunities in Ireland with US enterprises. Eamon Gilmore also joined US Secretary of State John Kerry, EU Commission President José Manuel Barroso, and Bill and Melinda Gates of the Gates Foundation to address the opening of the UN special event on the Millennium Development Goals, anti-poverty targets set by world leaders, to be met by 2015. I spoke with the Tánaiste at length on a variety of issues, and we'll be bringing you that interview here on Radio Irish shortly, so do stay tuned for that. In the meantime, let's sit back now and watch the speech given by Tánaiste Eamon Gilmore at the Irish Consulate here in New York, introduced by Consul General of Ireland, Mr. Noel Kilkenny. And if you're listening to us here at radioirish.com, you can pop over to our Facebook page, facebook.com/Radio Irish or facebook.com/Radio Irish Live to watch the address. Right here on Radio Irish.
This year in Ireland we're celebrating or marking a very important event in our history, the centenary of the Dublin Lockout, which had a huge effect on Irish politics and Irish labour organisations. And around you here tonight is an exhibition which the Tánaiste will speak about in his remarks. So ladies and gentlemen, please give a very warm New York welcome to the Tánaiste and Minister for Foreign Affairs and Trade, Eamon Gilmore.
Ambassador, Consul General Noel Kilkenny and Honora, ladies and gentlemen, friends of Ireland, Cordia. I know there are a lot of people from labour unions here, so for those of us who belong to labour unions, brothers and sisters, I'm delighted to have this opportunity to welcome you to Ireland House this evening as we officially launch an exhibition on James Connolly and the great Dublin Lockout of 1913. I want to particularly welcome here this evening Ambassador Anne Anderson, Ireland's new recently appointed Ambassador to the United States, and I know that you'll all join with me in wishing her well for her term of office, which has already got off to a fine start. Best of wishes, Anne, and we all wish you well in your work. And I also want to welcome, because Ambassador Anderson had been our ambassador at the United Nations, and I want to welcome her successor, Ambassador David Donoghue, who has replaced Anne as Ireland's ambassador to the United Nations, and he's joined here this evening by his wife Jill. Jill, you're very welcome here as well. I'm also delighted to welcome Joe Jemison from the AFL-CIO, together with representatives of the Carpenters Union, the Bricklayers Union, Teachers Union, Councilman Jimmy Van Bramer, the National President of the Ancient Order of Hibernians, Brendan Moore, Bill Baroni, and of course, I also want to acknowledge Loretta Brennan Glucksman, whom I met earlier this evening, who's, of course, chairperson of the American Ireland Fund, all great friends to Ireland and of things Irish. I want to especially acknowledge the work of the Connolly Commemorative Committee, many of whom are also here tonight. Ed Collins and Jack Mulvey of the Irish American Heritage Museum in Albany, Terry Galway of the Keene University, Rob Snyder of Rutgers University, Brendan Moore, Professor Marion Casey, Daphne Wolfe, Hilary Sweeney and their colleagues from the NYU Duxman Ireland House who produced this wonderful exhibition this evening. I just want to say briefly what I'm doing here in New York this week. The principal focus of my visit has been at the United Nations. I think we've done important work at the United Nations this week. We've avoided war. I think the outcome on Syria, is a huge win for all of us who want to see peaceful resolutions of conflicts. We also worked this week in teeing up the drive to eliminate hunger and poverty in the world. And I want to pay tribute in particular to the work that both Ambassador Anderson and Ambassador Gilmore did in framing the document which was agreed earlier this week. I also had the opportunity this week to meet with financial media, members of the business community, and to give them the good news that Ireland is recovering. We are about to emerge from the bailout that we found ourselves in at the end of 2010. We're building our exports. We're attracting investment. We're creating new jobs, the jobs that our young people need, and the jobs that I believe that we need to attract back home some of the young people who have emigrated in recent times. Our aim is to make sure that over time those young people who have left Ireland to find work elsewhere are given the opportunity to work at home. On Wednesday I also met with Richard Haas, who has been asked by the Northern Ireland Executive to help us address issues around parades and flags and the painful legacy of the past. And his work is a reminder that the peace process is still a work in progress, it's ongoing, and it requires your continued support. I've also met with many Irish groups working to achieve progress for those Irish people who are undocumented in this country. Tomorrow morning, I'm sure I'll meet more of them when I visit the Ashling Irish Centre on McLean Abbey. And pick up my schedule for this, I'll try and see at least part of a certain hurling game in which I know our Consul General has something interesting. Tonight, I want to place on record my gratitude and gratitude of the Irish Government for all the work that you do in different ways for the Irish community here in New York. Despite the financial challenges that we are facing, I'm proud that we've been able to manage our support of the government for the Irish centres and for Irish groups in this city. Support, of course, which is matched and exceeded by the Irish community here in so many different ways. I think that caring spirit is what it really means to be Irish in America. I want to say a few words about that spirit, and I would like to ask you to pause for a moment and to look at the images of around this room of working men, women and children, many of whom came from Ireland to America to give their labour, sometimes their lives, to build this new country. Though they built this city, we may sometimes rarely pause to remember them. Colin McCann has memorably written about the sandhogs who built the tunnel under the East River that many of you used to come to this event here this evening. I want to quote what he said. They arrive at dawn in their geography of hats, a dark field of figures, stalks in motion, bending towards the docklines. Scattered at first in the streets of Brooklyn, they have come by trolley and ferry and elevated train. They begin to gather together in a wave. All of them have faces hollowed by the gravity of their work. The images in the walls around you this evening speak eloquently too. Many of the images are of young children. A young boy in a miner's helmet and torch. A young girl gazing through the window of a factory. Boys and girls working cotton and silk looms for 7 cents an hour. They are scenes from Pennsylvania and New Jersey, but there might as easily be a record of working conditions in Ireland too at that time. These are the conditions that gave rise to the labour movements in Ireland and the United States. The exhibition recalls great Irish women, Elizabeth Gurley Flynn from Galway, and Mary Hunter Jones, Mother Jones, from Cork, whose motto was, "Pray for the dead and fight like hell for the living." And it recalls great labour leaders like Jim Larkin and of course James Consulate. Both men spent time here in New York. They worked here in New York supporting workers and building formidable reputations in the labour movement. Many Irish Americans have continued that tradition to the present day, which is why I was particularly delighted when John Sweeney, great leader of the American Federation of Labour and Congress of Industrial Organizations, agreed to co-chair a committee that I established to work on commemorations. We talk much of commemorating the keynote events of our history. The Ulster Covenant, Easter Rising, the War of Independence. They are all important. But as well as remembering the political events that sometimes divided us, we should remember too the conditions that we shared in common at that time, whether in Dublin, Belfast or New York. Earlier this month, I spoke in Cambridge about the need for an approach to commemorations that will advance reconciliation between Britain and Ireland and between our different political traditions in Ireland, including unionist and nationalist. But we need also to think in global terms, to plan our commemorations in a way that also involves you, the Irish abroad, in a partnership that allows us to reflect on the issues that connected us then as now. When I see reports of 146 garment workers, most of them immigrants, most of them women, who died in the Triangle Shirtwaist Factory fire here in Manhattan in 1911. I think of the fire that killed over 1,100 clothing workers in Bangladesh 5 months ago, and about which I sympathise with the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Sheikh Hassan, when we both co-chaired a panel on Millennium Development Goals on Wednesday this week. We can't pass all of these issues on to the historians yet. In some cases, the location may have changed, but the issues remain the same. The exhibition was developed in partnership with Glucksman Ireland House, New York University, and I would like to pay special tribute to Joe Lee, Marion Casey, Miriam Nahan, and Daphne Wolfe, who, for what I'm sure you will agree, is a beautifully presented work of scholarship. I want to particularly acknowledge their research, which has identified a photograph of James Connolly addressing 8,000 workers at a rally in Union Square on May Day 1908. We have iconic images of Larkin the orator, but nothing comparable of James Connolly until now. I've seen many pictures of James Connolly. This is the first one that I've seen him in full body. He was a heavy-set man. And I didn't know that. And I don't think many people involved in the Irish trade union and labour movement ever knew that. But that is an amazing photograph. And I so look forward to sharing that photograph, and it's in the commemorative booklet here, with members of James Connolly's family, whom I meet every year at the Connolly commemoration in May, many of whom I'm personally friendly with, and who have maintained their family connection with our traditions, with the labour movement, as indeed has the family of James Larkin. And we were all together just a few weeks ago in O'Connell Street when we had a state commemoration of the 1913 lockout. I look forward to us bringing this exhibition to Dublin later this year as one of a number of exhibitions and events organised to mark the anniversary of the Great Lockout. Having mentioned Dustman Ireland House and the role that it has played in this exhibition, it would be remiss of me, I think, not to pay special tribute to Loretta Brennan Dustman, one of Ireland's greatest friends, who will step down this year from the chair of the Ireland province. Loretta has brought an unmatched grace, devotion to the cause of Ireland, and is held in high esteem by everyone who has been fortunate enough to work with her. Finally, I want to thank you all for your enthusiastic support for the gathering, which has been a resounding success. 20% growth in our tourism numbers from North America so far this year. While New York was the only city in the world to have its own official gathering event, the Gathering Cush Rockaways, in solidarity with the communities affected by Superstorm Sandy, it seems that just about everyone in here was working to help promote Ireland this year, and I want to thank you for that. Next year will be a great year for tourism for Ireland too, boosted by the visit of Penn State and the University of Central Florida to Croke Park in August. They will compete for the Rooney Challenge Trophy, named after the distinguished former ambassador to Ireland, Dan Rooney, a great friend of Ireland and of Irish America. Your help in promoting visitors to travel to Ireland for the game will, I'm sure, be greatly appreciated. Finally, I want to say a sincere thank you also for everything that you do, all of you, for the less fortunate in our community, certainly in the tradition of the movement that is commemorated on the walls of our Consulate this evening. I want to thank you for what you do in promoting Irish culture and for keeping Ireland and the people of Ireland close to your hearts. Thank you very much.
Tánaiste Eamon Gilmore there, speaking at the Irish Consulate here in New York, and just before he gave his address to a gathering of hundreds of invitees from all sections of the Irish and Irish American community who literally packed the Irish Consulate, I spoke with Tánaiste Gilmore on a variety of subjects, and we'll be bringing you that extended interview here on Radio Irish shortly, so do stay tuned for that. For America's online Irish station Radio Irish, this is Sean McCarthy.